Hi, I'm Nick from Meeple Mythos, and today we're looking at the solo mode for Mindclash's latest release, Revenant. I evaluate games across 7 different metrics on a 1 to 5 scale. Then I use a little eldritch magic to convert that into a final score out of 10. My goal is to keep this short, sweet, and right to the point, so let's dive in. Good news, Revenant is fun, really fun. It has a narrative arc that I don't think I've really seen before in board games. Early on, you have just this smorgasbord of choices, which can often feel really overwhelming, especially for new players, especially on your first play, maybe even first couple of plays. But by mid to late game, after the Voidborn have just absolutely wrecked your fleets, and you're praying to the house's gods that 4 more don't spill out of the rift that happens to be right next to your favored arc ship, your choices shrink drastically, but then you've probably, hopefully, built an engine to deal with it. My score for this is 4 out of 5. Next is depth and strategy. And here, the early game decision space is huge. It's almost too overwhelming, especially for new players. But as things progress, your strategy usually seems to converge on one of 4 main paths. Either 1, maxing out your captain, 2, supercharging your cadets, 3, upgrading your frigate, or 4, playing just a ton of instant command cards that give you tons of different things. And you can do a mix and a match of these and that. But by late game, every action needs to be massive. It needs to count for so much. So between your starting agendas, your hidden influence, and any of the card draws that you get, the game nudges you towards a certain pathway. But I'm going to warn you, if you fail to recognize any of those, or you fail to really go down any of those key paths at any particular rate, then the game's really going to squeeze you tight right at the end there, and it's going to be really hard to get anything actually done. And with that, I gave a score 4 out of 5. For replayability, I'm going to go ahead and jump in and just let you know I'm giving this, again, a 4 out of 5. The board setup is static, but the cards elevate this completely. The game wants you to play them. So between these starting agenda cards, like I mentioned before, the starting hidden influence, and even the starting frigate command card, as well as cadet cards that you get, you can do a lot of different things. Your overall strategy might narrow down into one of those 4 paths that I mentioned earlier, but how you get there is going to vary wildly. You might push your frigate's weaponry to just the absolute limit, and I've seen this, and it's quite fun to have it just be a powerhouse of a ship roaming around the Revenant and just destroying Voidborn. Or you build 2 hyper specialized cadets, one protecting you at the arc ships and the other feeding you resources from colony cards. So while the replayability of the setup might be very similar, at least the board wise, what you can really do within those 4 strategic generalizations is really massive. And so with that, I give it a 4 out of 5 again. Okay, now we're at the part that hopefully many of you have been waiting for in this video, since this is a solo review. But for the solo AIEs, for me, a 5-star solo bot is basically no-brainer. It's no-brainer system with minimal management that still feels like another player. And Revenant, oh, it gets so close to this. You basically flip a card and then you place one of its workers on a ship of that color, and you can actually see which ship it's going to probably land on, unless it, for whatever reason, gets destroyed beforehand. But with that being said, there are going to be certain parts where there's targeting priorities, and you're going to have to sit there and figure out how exactly it's going to deal damage or do anything else, and select where corruption goes. And so there's a little bit of administration that can occur, and sometimes that can be kind of a headache depending on what stage of the game you're in. But it's really not that bad, and it still captures that 2-player dynamic well, just that the solo bot doesn't move ships or hurt any Voidborn, which can be a real problem as well, whereas a real human player would do that exact thing. And so with that, I give the solo bot a 4 out of 5. Okay, so now we're at accessibility, and this is where we start to kind of roll down the hill a little bit. Revenant's going to get a 2 out of 5 for me for this. It's a dense, heavy game with at least a 30-minute plus teach, but the biggest hurdle is the iconography. I love Ian O'Toole's designs. In fact, on some of the boards here, you can see I have a lot of his designs. I have Voidfall, I even have Speakeasy, and behind the camera, I've got a ton of Lacerda games as well. And we all know that that pair is a dynamic duo force to be reckoned with. And his work on Voidfall, specifically, I'm calling out, is incredible. But here, the icons feel almost sparser and more obscure. I'm still flipping through the glossary constantly just to decode single symbols that turn out to be whole paragraphs of use. And that can be a problem. With Voidfall, you had a lot of icons. With Revenant, it seems like you have less icons and they seem to be a little bit more confusing. And so with that, I give it 2 out of 5. Next is theme and immersion, and that's fine, 3 out of 5. Aside from moments when the Revenant hypercharges out of the system or more Voidborn pour from the rifts, I don't strongly feel like managing the less vestiges of noble houses of a fleet. And that's okay by me. I actually, theme and immersion is low on the totem pole as far as importance for me. Just don't go into this expecting a super deeply thematic story here. And so I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. It's Mindclash. They don't mess around. The retail edition is so good that I'm actually going to recommend skipping the Admiral edition unless you really want the minis to maybe paint. But the standard punch board and cardstock are top tier. You get the exact same gameplay experience without any unnecessary FOMO with the retail, and it looks great. In fact, the minis I really only use for the playthrough on my channel. They generally sit in the box. Maybe I'll play with it a little bit more. But with that, I'm going to give Revenant a 5 out of 5 on components and production. All right, that's it. Now tallying up all those scores, we go through our mythical algorithm, and that's going to give Revenant a final score of 7.2 out of 10. Now, if you're used to Board Game Geek ratings, a 7.2 might sound okay. But on my scale, a 5 is an average game that I would still recommend to people. That's probably equivalent to a BGG 7, Board Game Geek 7. So a 7.2 is a strong recommendation for both solo and multiplayer gamers. If you enjoyed this review, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments below, are you picking up Revenant or is the iconography a deal breaker for you? Until next time, keep your myths legendary. I'm Nick, and I'll see you next time.